In this example, we're going to look at how to multiply radical expressions. So we're given the problem, the square root of 2x squared times the square root of 6x to the fourth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify each of these radicals by using the property of radicals that states that I can give that square root to all the terms inside the radical. So for example, square root of 2x squared becomes the square root of 2 times the square root of x squared, and the square root of 6x to the fourth becomes the square root of 6 and the square root of x to the fourth. Okay. Now we can simplify them. So for our numbers, we would see if we could simplify them by using that prime factor tree. But notice 2 is already a prime number, so that square root of 2 cannot be simplified. Okay. Now let's look at the square root of 6. If we did the factor tree off of the square root of 6, notice that we would end in 2 prime numbers. That tells us again that the square root of 6 is already simplified. So we know in our answers we are going to have that square root of 2 and the square root of 6. Now let's look at our x's. For this first x, the square root of x squared, notice that that exponent of 2 is going to cancel with our index of 2. So this cancels each other out and we're just left with x. For x to the fourth, remember we could write this x to the fourth as x 4 times. And since we're taking the square root of x to the fourth, we're going to get pairs of 2. Notice that I have 2 pairs of x's, meaning I'm going to take out an x squared. If I do that, no x's are left inside of the radical, so that means that the square root of x to the fourth simplifies to x squared. So taking all this information, remember we still have that the square root of 2 and the square root of 6. The first radical with the x's canceled and we were just left with x. And then the x to the fourth square root, we were left with x squared. So now we just start simplifying further by combining the radicals together and combining everything that's on the outside. So on the outside we have x and x squared. So it's going to be x to the third. And then we have the square root of 2 and the square root of 6. So we could go ahead and write it just like this. Okay. Or we could combine this and this becomes the square root of 12. Okay. For the purpose of this question, this part is perfectly fine right here. Okay. Especially in, oh, never mind, I see. On the homework, it has you divide it into several steps. So this actually, they would actually probably prefer this last answer as the most simplified. Or they may even have you try to do the factor tree off of 12. Okay. Which means this could simplify to 2x cubed square roots of 3.